Today is our 7th wedding anniversary. I carefully prepared a 3-hour dinner. I sent him a text message, "Dinner is ready, when will you be back?" He replied, "Sorry honey, I'm fishing. Don't wait for me." When he sent this message, I saw his location on my phone. We use family sharing positioning. After he forgot to pick me up from the hospital last year, I secretly turned on that function. I told myself at the time that it was just in case. If he left me somewhere again, at least I would know where he was. But in fact, from that day on, I took a look at his position every night. At 8:20, his position was not by the river. I zoomed in on the small green dot on Google Maps. It lay quietly in a place about 40 minutes drive from the city. Lakeview Retreat, private lakeside retreat. I picked up the phone and dialed his number. 1 sound, 2 sounds, 3 sounds. Got connected. "Hey." His voice sounded a bit far away, as if he was trying to distance himself from someone. "Where are you?" I said, "By the river. Fishing." "Are you sure?" "Emily, I'm really busy." Don't dash. He paused, and I heard a very vague voice, like someone said something next to him. "Jason, come here. You promised me." A woman's voice. Young, with a coquettish tone, as if he was complaining about a boyfriend who was late, rather than complaining about a man with a wife. The air froze in my ears. "Who's talking?" I asked. Jason was silent for 3 seconds. In that silence, I could hear my own heartbeat, and the faint sound of water in the background of the vacation home, probably an artificial fountain or something like that. "It's Chloe," he said, "fishing friend. We formed a small team to come here. The water conditions here are really good. Don't dash fishing, buddy?" I couldn't even recognize the voice. It was so calm. "You're in a private vacation home with your fishing buddy. It's just fishing. Stop being dramatic." This sentence hit me like a slap in the face. Not because of its content, but because of the tone in which he said it, that tired sense of "here you go again," as if I was the one making trouble, as if questioning how unreasonable it was for a husband to stay in a vacation home with a woman on his wedding anniversary. Then the voice rang again, closer, as if it had specifically walked to the phone. "Jason, you promised me a night flight, remember? Let's go." I hung up the phone. It's not because I can't take it anymore. It's because I suddenly understood something. I am here, in the kitchen, wearing the navy blue skirt I specially put on, facing 2 candles that have been burned crookedly, and he, somewhere 40 kilometers away, is staying with a woman named Chloe, and he doesn't care that I know. It's not that I don't know, it's that I don't care. There is a difference between the two. Not knowing is an oversight, not caring is a choice. I sat at the dining table and looked at the plate of cold lamb chops. The fat had condensed into a white film on the plate. The candle burned to the end, and the wax dripped onto the silver candlestick, like tears, but I didn't feel sad. I'm just wondering, how long has it been since I saw that light in Jason's eyes? That "I want to look at you" light? I think back to our wedding. Not the church one, but the little party later in a friend's backyard. He drank too much, hugged me and said, "I'm gonna make you happy every single day." I believed him. It's not because I'm naive, it's because when he said it, he believed it himself. But that was 7 years ago. 7 years later, my husband arranged a night flight with a woman named Chloe in a private vacation home, and I sat here, facing an uneaten dinner, like a plant that had been placed in the corner and forgotten to be watered. I didn't cry. I stood up, poured the lamb chops into the trash can, and poured the mashed potatoes in. The onions and red wine sauce slid down the white porcelain plate into the garbage bag with a dull sound. I put the dishes in the sink without washing them. I pulled the candle out of the candlestick and found 2 white wax pillars that were burned to only a section. They were soft in my hands. I walked into the bedroom, opened the closet, and dug out a shoebox inside. Inside the shoebox are my stashes. Not the money, not the secrets, but the photos. Pictures of our first year. The first date, the first Christmas together, the one of him sleeping on the bench in the corridor while waiting for me to finish a minor surgery outside the hospital. I secretly photographed him with his mouth open, his tie tilted to one side, and a cup of cold coffee still clutched in his hand. I took out the photos one by one and looked at those smiles, those moments that I thought would never disappear. Then I deleted them all. Not tear it up, delete it. In the mobile phone, in the computer, in the cloud. Not a single one left. My fingers didn't shake while I was doing this. This was the scariest part for me in retrospect. I didn't hesitate at all. The next morning, Jason came back. He changed his shoes at the door, walked into the kitchen, and frowned when he saw the plates piled in the sink and the mutton chop bones exposed in the trash can. "You didn't eat last night?" I sat on the sofa in the living room, holding a cup of cold tea in my hand, looking at him. "I've eaten," he said. "Chloe brought some sandwiches." Do you know her? She is also learning fly fishing and is quite talented. Chloe. It's Chloe again. I'm going to learn to fish, I said. Jason was stunned for a moment, then smiled. I've seen that kind of smile before. It was the polite, perfunctory smile he made when his subordinate told a joke that wasn't funny. You? Fishing? Fly fishing. He was really stunned this time. Do you know how hard that is? I know. You have to wear waders, you have to stand in the water for hours, you have to learn the rhythm of casting, you have to understand hydrology, entomology, I know. And it's expensive. A set of entry-level equipment costs several $1,000s. I know. He looked at me like a man who suddenly decided to go to Mars. It's up to you, he said, picking up the car keys. I might not be back for dinner tonight, I have a project to catch up on. He's gone. I sat on the sofa, drank my cup of herbal tea, then turned on my computer and searched for fly fishing gear near me. 3 hours later, I was standing in a fishing tackle shop called the Driftwood. The clerk looked at the list in my hand, his expression changing from confusion to sympathy. Do you really need this? He pointed to the $2.400 sage pole on the list. This pole is used by professional competitive players. I want this one. What about waders? Sims G4 Pro? This, swipe your card. It cost me $4.300. I bought poles, wheels, the vests, waders that I had no idea how to use, and a bunch of fake baits that I couldn't even name. When the clerk was helping me pack the bags, he asked cautiously, "Are you sure you know how to dash? I'll learn." I drove to the river. It's the river that Jason often goes to. It's 40 minutes away from the city. The banks are covered with willows and alders. The water is so clear that you can see the stones and water plants underneath. I parked the car on the gravel by the river, put on my expensive waders, and walked into the water carrying the pole that was longer than my arm. The water is very cold. Through the 2 layers of waterproof material, I can still feel the chill creeping up from the soles of my feet. I stood in the water and tried to think back to those instructional videos I watched on YouTube the night before. They say that when throwing a pole, you should imagine the pole as a clock face, with an arc from 10 o'clock to 2 o'clock, your wrist should be steady, and the line should follow the rhythm. I swung the pole back. The line didn't move. I'll throw it away again. The line fell limply on the water in front of me like a dead snake. Come on, I said to myself, can't you even do this? I took the thread back and tried again. This time I used more strength. The pole drew an arc in my hand, and the yellow fly line finally drew a circle in the air. Then the hook caught something. Not water, not rocks, not trees. It is something soft, with warmth, and can make sounds. What the? A man's voice. I turned around and saw a man standing less than 2 meters behind me, covering the back of his neck with one hand, with an expression on his face somewhere between shock and anger. He was wearing a dark green fishing vest, waders rolled up to his knees, and an old but expensive-looking suitcase at his feet. His face was half hidden by a wide-brimmed hat, but I could see his jawline and his eyes that were staring at me like a koala that had just fallen from a tree. My hook hung on his collar accurately. I'm so sorry. I hurriedly reached for the hook, but the bottom of the water was full of slippery rocks. My feet tilted, and I threw myself forward. The pole in my hand flew out, causing a large splash of water. He grabbed my arm and steadied me. Then he glanced at the pole in my hand, then at the brand new equipment on my body, and the corners of his mouth moved. Expensive gear, he said, his voice low, like the unhurried flow of water under the river. No idea what you're doing. My face burned as if someone had poured boiling water on it. I'm learning, I said, my voice harder than I expected. I can tell. He let go of my arm and bent down to pick up my pole, holding it in his hand like an instrument. He looked at the model mark on the shaft, then at the lines on the wheels, and then looked up at me. Sage, I know. Do you know how to thread a thread? I opened my mouth but didn't speak. He took off his hat and hung it on the suitcase, and I saw his face. He is not the kind of handsome that would make women scream. He has a profile that has been polished by time and river water. He has high cheekbones and gray-blue eyes, like the sky reflected on the river. He was about 35 or 6 years old, maybe older. There was something unurban about the lines on his face. Give me the pole, he said. I handed it over. He caught it, moving his fingers along the shaft as if inspecting the strings of an instrument. Then he pulled out the thread, used a technique I couldn't understand, put the thread through the guide ring again, and tied a few knots. The whole process took no more than 30 seconds. You're holding the pole wrong, he said, handing it back. It's too tight. Fly fishing isn't tug of war, it's dancing. Dancing? Rhythm, not power. The harder you push, the less the string will listen to you. I took the pole and wrapped my fingers stiffly around the handle. He glanced at me and came up behind me. I felt his body heat and his smell of river water and leather. His hand came over mine, adjusting the position of my fingers. "Let it go," he said, "and let it lie in the palm of your hand without holding it." His hands were rough, with calluses on his knuckles, but his movements were gentle. He moved my hand back, tilting the shaft and spreading the line behind me. "Don't push hard as you move forward, let the pole carry you." Like picking up a glass of water from the table and then gently putting it down. I pushed forward according to his rhythm and the line popped out from behind me, drawing a perfect arc in the air, and then landed gently on the water, like a leaf. "Again," he said. We tried again. This time the line fell further. "Better." He stepped back to his suitcase, opened it, and began to pack his things. I stood in the water, holding the pole, my heart beating fast. Not because he was behind me. Because for the first time, I felt that this pole was not a damn stick. "What's your name?" I asked. He didn't even look up. "Daniel." "My name is Emily." "I know." I was stunned for a moment. "You know me?" He took out a box of fake bait from the box and carefully adjusted the feathers on it with a small pair of tweezers. "This is the only water area around here, and Jason comes here often. He mentioned you." My fingers tightened around the shaft. "What did he say?" Daniel finally looked up at me. "Say you don't really like him fishing." "It's not that I don't like fishing," I said, "it's that I don't like that he never comes back." He didn't answer the question. He put the bait into the box, closed the lid, and stood up. "If you want to learn, come here at 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. The river is the quietest at this time and the fish are the most active." "Okay. Don't wear those wading shoes." He glanced at the shoes on my feet. "Your feet are too small and you won't be able to stand firmly in the water. Go to REI and buy a pair of children's shoes, wader boots, with felt soles, which have good grip." "Okay." He picked up his suitcase and walked up the riverbank. After walking a few steps, he stopped and looked back at me. "Also, don't throw the thread at others." Then he left. I stood in the water and watched his back disappear behind the willow forest. The pole in my hand still retained the warmth of his fingers. When I arrived at the river at 5:50 the next morning, Daniel was already standing in the water. He stood next to a large rock in the middle of the river, his waders rolled up to his thighs and the water up to his knees. His pole rested on his shoulder, and the line drew a small circle on the water, as if talking to something underwater. The morning fog rose from the river, turning the trees in the distance into gray silhouettes. Their silhouettes looked unrealistic in the fog, like a 19th century oil painting. I changed my shoes and walked into the water. The water was colder than yesterday, and my toes were curled up in my shoes. I walked next to him, about 2 meters away from him, and stopped. "Morning," I said. "Yeah." He didn't turn his head, his eyes remained on the water. I followed his line of sight and saw nothing. "What are you looking at?" "Trout," he said, "is eating mayflies. If you look at the water, those little ripples, they're looking up." I stared at the water for a long time, and finally saw a small circle, like someone poked lightly on the water. Then another, and another. "See," I said. "The problem now," he said, taking the pole off his shoulder, "is that you want the bait to land next to the ripple, but not right in the middle. The fish aren't that smart, but they aren't that stupid either." He demonstrated it to me once. The shaft drew a perfect arc in the air, and the line landed on the point he had spotted, so lightly that there was almost no sound. The lure floated on the water for a few seconds, then the water exploded. "A fish." He raised his wrist, the shaft bent into a bow, and the line made a buzzing sound in the air. The fish turned over in the water, its silver belly flashing in the morning light. "You took the bait," I said, my voice rising a few notches involuntarily. "Yeah." He did not rush to reel in the line, but let the fish swim in the water for a while, swinging the rod in the direction of the fish, like flying a kite. Then he slowly reeled in the line and guided the fish to his feet. It was a brown trout, about 30 centimeters long, with black spots on its back and its gill covers opening and closing. He bent down and gently took out the hook, then held the fish in his hands and let it submerge in the water. The fish paused in his hand for a few seconds, then flicked its tail and disappeared into the deep water. "Did you let it go?" I asked. "The rule here is catch and release," he said, pulling the pole back, "and I don't really like fish." "Then why are you fishing?" He glanced at me. "You ask questions like a psychiatrist." "I'm just curious." He thought for a moment and threw the thread out again. "Because out here," he said, his voice soft, "everything makes sense." I didn't know what he meant by everything, but I suddenly felt that I knew what he meant. From that day on, I went to the river at 6 o'clock every morning. Daniel was always there before me, standing next to his rock like a riverside fixture. He doesn't talk much, but every time I make a mistake, he corrects me in an unhurried way. On the third day, I learned the double haul. He stood nearby and watched me dump him about 20 times before finally saying not bad. That was probably the highest praise he could give. On the fifth day, I caught my first fish. It was very small, probably only as long as my hand, but when I felt the tug from the other end of the line, my heart skipped a beat, as if something was alive on the other end of the line. Take in the line, Daniel said. Don't go too fast. Feel where it's going. I pulled the fish to my feet and squatted down to look at it. It struggled in my palm, its scales glistening in the sun, its gill covers opening and closing rapidly. I could feel its heartbeat, very fast, like a frightened bird. I put it back in the water. It paused for a second, then swam away. You laughed, Daniel said. I looked up at him. He was leaning on the stone, his hat was lowered, but I could see a very shallow arc at the corner of his mouth. Did I laugh? Yeah. Maybe. That morning, we sat by the river until almost 9 o'clock. The sun has risen very high, and most of the fog on the river has cleared. Daniel took out a thermos flask from his suitcase and poured me a cup of coffee. The coffee is bitter but very fragrant. You come here every day? I asked. Almost. Don't you have to go to work? I have a company, he said, but I leave most of it to others. What to do? Software. What software? He took a sip of coffee and didn't answer. After a while, he said, why don't you leave him? This question came too directly, like a stone suddenly appearing at the bottom of the river, and I was unprepared. Who? Jason. I put the coffee cup on my lap. How do you know we have a problem? Because you show up here at 6 o'clock every morning instead of at home. I was silent for a long time. The river flowed softly through my wading shoes. There was a bird chirping in the distance, the sound was sharp, as if it was quarreling with someone. I don't know, I finally said, maybe it's just getting used to it. Habit is no reason. What about you? I asked, why don't you find someone who doesn't need to be by the river? He didn't speak. After a while, he stood up and poured the coffee into the river. It's time to go back, he said. The water conditions are going to change. He began to take in the line very slowly, as if he was delaying something. I looked at him and suddenly felt that there was something very heavy about this man, like wading shoes filled with water, but he never let people see it. Another week has passed. I started looking forward to 6 o'clock every morning. Not looking forward to fishing, although I do like that feeling more and more, but looking forward to walking to the river, seeing his car parked on the gravel, seeing his hat hanging on the suitcase, and seeing his silhouette standing in the water. I started spending 2 minutes brushing my hair before leaving the house. I started to put on a quick-drying suit that looked better than yesterday. I told myself it was because I didn't want the wind to blow my hair all over my face while fishing, but I knew it wasn't. On the 11th day, we sat on the riverbank and ate sandwiches he had bought from town. I took off my wading shoes next to me, and my feet were soaked in the water. They were cool and comfortable. Out here, I said, taking a bite of my sandwich, I forgot I'm married. He was drinking water and paused when he heard these words. He put the water bottle down and looked at me. That's not good. I know. You can't use this as a refuge. The problem won't go away on its own. I didn't use it as a refuge. You come here every day and you go back looking sadder than when you came. I was stunned. I thought I hid it well. When I get home every morning, I sit in the car for 10 minutes, put away the happy expression on my face, put on the normal Emily mask, and then open the door and go in. I thought no one could tell. Did you see it? I asked. It's hard not to see. I looked down at my toes in the water. I don't know what to do. Every time I go back, he's not there. Even if he is here, he is not here. He was sitting on the sofa, scrolling through his phone, or watching fishing videos. Whatever I told him, he would always answer with oh and okay. Sometimes I feel like I'm talking to a wall. Then why are you still there? Because, I took a deep breath, because I don't know where I can go after I leave. I have no income or savings of my own, and his company resources, economy, and social circle are all in his hands. I am a background in his life. Daniel said nothing. He screwed on the cap of the water bottle and put it into the suitcase. You know, he said, I've known Jason for 3 years. He is one of the earliest employees of our company and is technically excellent, but this person has a problem. He always thinks that the next one is the best. The next project, the next position, the next, he didn't finish, but I got it. The next woman. I said. He didn't deny it. I smiled a little, but it wasn't really a smile. I picked up the pole, walked into the water, and started casting. Once, twice, 3 times. The line landed on the spot I spotted every time, but there were no ripples on the water and no fish. Daniel stood on the shore and did not follow. That night, Jason had dinner at home for the first time. I made pasta and he sat at the table for 10 minutes while his phone rang 3 times. The third time, he stood up, walked to the balcony and answered the phone. I heard him say, "Yeah, I know. Tomorrow, same place." I cut the noodles on the plate without asking. When he came back, he had an expression on his face that I hadn't seen in a long time, that "I have something good that I can't tell you" kind of smug look on his face. "The company has a dinner next week," he said. "For the executives, you have to go." "Good. Dress well." I looked up at him. When have I dressed immodestly? He didn't answer, just lowered his head and continued eating noodles. I looked at him and suddenly thought of a question. "What's the name of your company?" "Apex Systems," he said. "I've told you 100 times." "Who's the boss?" "Daniel Brooks." He said the name with a subtle nervousness in his tone, as if he was mentioning someone who shouldn't be mentioned casually, but don't even think about talking to him. He is not very social. My heart skipped a beat. Daniel Brooks. I put down my fork. "What did you say your boss's name was?" "Daniel Brooks." "Why do you ask?" "Fine." I picked up the water glass and took a sip. The water almost choked my trachea. "Just ask." "Don't screw it up anyway," Jason said. "This dinner is very important. The company is being reorganized recently, and several VP positions are being vacated. I need to make a good impression on Daniel." "Good." That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying Daniel's words in my mind. I've known Jason for 3 years. 3 years. He knows Jason is my husband. He knew Jason had a wife. He knew that his wife was alone at home every night, waiting for someone who would never come back. He knows everything. But he appeared at the riverside at 6 o'clock every morning, taught me how to throw the pole, poured me coffee, and asked me why I didn't leave. I rolled over and buried my face in the pillow. I don't know who I'm angry with. Angry Daniel? Angry at Jason? Or am I angry with myself? The next morning, I was late. It was already 7 o'clock when I arrived at the river. Daniel was standing in the water with a line drawing circles on the water. "I thought you weren't coming," he said. "I've considered it." He turned to look at me. I didn't get close. I stood on the shore and looked at him across a few meters of water. "You should have told me," I said. "Tell you what? Who are you?" He paused. The line slipped out of his hand and landed on the water. "No fish." "It doesn't matter who I am," he said. "You're my husband's boss. So you stay here with me every morning. Don't you think there's something wrong with that?" He pulled the line back and turned to face me. "Emily, I'm not pursuing you. I'm teaching you to fish. If you think I'm doing something else, you can leave now." I stood there, biting my lip. The river water flowed under my feet and was very cold, making my toes numb with cold. I didn't leave. He looked at me, his expression slowly softening a little. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said, "but I'm not going to lie to you either. I know who he is and I know what he's doing. But that's not why I'm here." "Then what's your reason?" He was silent for a long time. Then he leaned the pole against his shoulder and said something that completely stunned me. "Because when you were at the river, you didn't look like a person who needed to be saved." That night, I put on the respectable dress that Jason asked me to wear. It's black, has a waist, and the neckline is neither high nor low. It looks expensive, but I actually bought it during the discount season. I stood in front of the mirror for 5 minutes, making sure I looked like a mid-level tech wife, and then followed Jason out the door. The dinner was held in the banquet hall of a hotel in the city center. Crystal lamps, white tablecloths, waiters in suits carrying champagne, and the kind of background music that makes your ears buzz. As soon as Jason entered the door, he let go of my hand, and like a fish being put back into the water, he quickly swam toward his group of colleagues. I stood in the corner with a glass of champagne and looked at these people's faces. They all look successful, confident, and sure they belong here. Their wives or husbands stood nearby, smiling and nodding, like exquisite decorations. It suddenly occurred to me that I was one of them. "Emily?" A woman's voice. I turned around and saw a very young woman standing next to me. She had blonde hair and beautiful tan skin. She was wearing a dress that was obviously not on sale. She was holding a martini and looking at me with a bright smile, but there was something in her eyes that made me uncomfortable. "You are Jason's wife, right?" "Yes." "Are you?" "Chloe," she said, holding out her hand. "Chloe Reed. I'm fishing with Jason." My fingers paused in her palm for a second. Her hands were soft and her nails were neatly manicured and coated with a layer of transparent nail polish. "Oh," I said, "Jason mentioned you." "Really?" She smiled. "What did he say about me?" "Say you have talent." "He's so nice," she said, taking a sip of her martini. "We went to Lakeview together last week. Do you know that place?" It's very private and the water conditions are very good. My fingers tightened around the glass. I know. Jason is really good. Not everyone can persevere in fly fishing. But he is very patient, both with people and with things. When she said right to people, right to things, she glanced at me. The glance was brief, but I saw it. It was an I know something you don't know look. Are you familiar with him? I asked. We're fairly acquainted, she said. We often go out together. Often? Yeah. She tilted her head. Do you mind? I looked at her and suddenly wanted to laugh. What do you mind? He spends so much time outside. Some of the wives are going to be unhappy. Some wives do, I said, but I think everyone needs their own space. She raised her eyebrows, as if waiting for me to continue. But I didn't. I took a sip of champagne and then looked over her shoulder to the other end of the banquet hall. Daniel stood in the middle of the crowd. He was wearing a dark blue suit, no tie, and the top 2 buttons of his shirt were unbuttoned. His hair was combed neatly than that of the riverside, but I could still recognize that jawline, those hands, and that expression that seemed to be in another place while standing in the crowd. He was talking to several people, one of whom was obviously someone important, for everyone was surrounding him like planets around a star. He nodded and occasionally said a word or two, which made others laugh or show expressions of thinking. This is his world. Not the river, not the waiters and the fake bait, but this is the chandelier, the suit, the strength of the handshake, the weight of the look. I suddenly felt like I was standing outside a piece of glass, watching people walking around inside, but I couldn't break the glass. Jason came over, took my hand, and led me to Daniel. Daniel, Jason said, with a kind of respect in his voice that I had never heard before, this is my wife, Emily. Daniel looked at me. Those gray-blue eyes were gentle in the morning light by the river, like pebbles at the bottom of the water. But under the lights of the banquet hall, they become very deep, like a well, you can't see the bottom. Nice to meet you, he said. His hand held my hand with a short, professional touch, as if the handshake had been performed 10,000 times by him, and it had become a process that did not require emotion. Nice to meet you, I said. We looked at each other like 2 strangers. When his fingers were removed from my palm, he didn't stay for a second longer. Jason laughed next to him. Emily has also started learning fishing recently. I can't believe it. Really? Daniel's tone did not fluctuate at all. How did you learn? I'm still learning, I said. I've caught a few small ones. That's good, he said. Keep up the good work. Then he turned to talk to someone else. When Jason pulled me away, my legs felt like lead. I looked back at Daniel. He was standing in the middle of the crowd, holding champagne, with a calm expression, as if nothing had happened. Those early mornings. The rhythm of those broadcasts. He stood behind me, put his hand over mine, and told me to let go. He asked me why I didn't leave. When you were at the river, you didn't look like a person who needed to be saved, he said. It's like nothing happened. I was standing in the banquet hall, surrounded by people, but I had never felt so much like a joke. After the dinner, Jason was in the car with music on and his fingers tapping on the steering wheel, looking in a good mood. Daniel noticed you, he said. Notice it? Well, he asked you something. I think that's a good sign. He usually doesn't talk about this with people. What did he ask me? I asked you about learning to fish. I said you started recently and you are quite enthusiastic. I leaned on the seat and watched the streetlights outside the car window move back one by one. What did he say? He said pretty good. Jason smiled. For him, this is already a big compliment. I turned my face to the window and closed my eyes. When I got home that night, I sat on the bathroom floor without turning on the light. The phone screen is on, showing the chat history between Jason and me. I scrolled up to 3 months ago, 6 months ago, and 1 year ago. The whole screen is filled with words like not coming back for dinner, working overtime, at the riverside and don't wait for me. I opened Chloe's Instagram. Her account is public and full of photos of her by the river, wearing waders, holding up a fish and smiling broadly. The most recent one was posted 3 days ago, located at Lakeview Retreat, with the caption, "Best nights are the ones you don't plan." In the photo, she is sitting next to a campfire with a man's back behind her. The figure from behind was wearing a jacket that I recognized. I turned off my phone and sat in the dark for a long time. The next morning, when I went to the river, Daniel was not there. I waited for an hour. 2 hours. Occasionally a fish would jump on the water, but I was in no mood to cast. I sat on the bank and looked at the river. The water was still the same water and the stones were still the same, but he was not here. The whole river was like a room that had been emptied of furniture. On the 3rd day, he was still not there. On the 4th day, my phone rang. It was a text message from Jason, Don't cook tonight, I'll be back to eat. When he came back, he brought a bouquet of flowers. The kind of flowers sold in supermarkets, with discount labels printed on the wrapping paper. It's for you. He put the flowers on the table. I've been a little busy lately and I've neglected you. I looked at the bouquet of flowers. The lilies and daisies were paired together in a perfunctory manner, as if they just picked up a bunch and left. Thank you. By the way, he sat down, have you gone fishing recently? Occasionally. Don't go. I looked up at him. Why? No reason, he said, I just think it's not safe for you to be alone by the water. And he paused, have you been too close to Daniel recently? My heart tightened. Me and Daniel? You were seen with him by the river. Several times. He's teaching me how to fish. Really? Jason looked at me, with something in his eyes that I rarely see, suspicion. Are you sure he just taught you how to fish? What do you mean? I mean, his voice became colder. Daniel Brooks is not the kind of person who would spend time teaching a beginner to fish. He doesn't even attend the company's executive meetings. Do you think he will show up at the river at 6 o'clock every morning for an ordinary student? I opened my mouth but couldn't speak. Don't go, Jason said. I'm not suggesting you, I'm telling you. That night, I lay in bed and listened to Jason talking on the phone in the next room. His voice was low, but I could still hear bits and pieces. She doesn't know, next week, don't worry. I pulled the quilt over my head and covered my ears. The next day, Chloe posted a new photo on Instagram. This time it wasn't a fishing photo, it was a selfie of her leaning on someone's shoulder. The person's face was obscured by a sticker, but that hand, I recognized that hand. There is a ring on the ring finger of that hand. The caption is, some people wait for years to find what I found in months. Someone commented under the photo, is that Jason? She did not reply, but liked it. I turned off my phone and sat in the living room, watching the sun rise slowly outside the window. I could see the shoreline in the distance, the willow forest, that direction. Daniel disappeared. He didn't answer the phone, didn't reply to messages, and there was no longer his car by the river. I went to the river at 6 o'clock every morning and waited until 9 o'clock. For a week, he didn't show up. One night in the second week, Jason went out again. He said it was for work and entertainment, but I saw him changing into a pair of wading shoes at the door when he went out. I waited for him to leave, picked up the car keys, and drove to the river. Not the body of water that Jason frequented. It's Daniel's piece. It's that big rock, that morning mist, that location. When I arrived, the riverside was empty. The moon is very big and shines on the water, making the river look like a silver ribbon. I stood on the shore, looking at the stone, looking at that position, and his voice was all in my mind. Out here, everything makes sense. You can't use this as a refuge. When you were at the river, you didn't look like a person who needed to be saved. My tears fell. Not the kind of quiet, elegant tears that fall drop by drop. It was the kind of uncontrollable crying that surged up from the deepest part of the body, as if something was breaking in the chest. I squatted on the river bank and covered my face with my hands. Tears flowed from my fingers and dripped on the stones, making a very soft sound. I don't know how long I cried. It could be 10 minutes, it could be an hour. When I stopped, the moon had moved to the other side of the river, and the silver light strips on the water turned into broken silver. Then I heard a voice behind me. Emily. I turned around. Daniel stood a few meters away, wearing a black coat and not holding a pole. He looked thinner than the last time we met, and the lines on his face were harder, as if they had been rubbed by something. There you are, I said, my voice as hoarse as sandpaper. Where have you been? There are things to deal with. You disappeared for 2 weeks. I know. He came over and sat down next to me. We didn't speak, the river flowed under our feet, and the moon broke into pieces on the water. I saw the picture of Chloe, I said, and the comments. You know their stuff. I know. You always knew. He was silent for a while. I've known it since year 1. She's not the first. I close my eyes. Not the first. This sentence is like a knife, not the kind that stabs in, but the kind that cuts slowly. You don't know when it will start. By the time you feel the pain, the blood has already flowed all over the floor. Why didn't you tell me? I asked. Because there's no use telling you, he said, you have to see it for yourself. Are you protecting him? No. He turned to look at me. I'm waiting for you to be ready. What are you ready for? Be ready to go. I looked into his eyes. In the moonlight, those gray-blue eyes look shallow, like the surface of a river, but you never know how deep they are underneath. Leave him, I said, and what? And you live. Alive? You don't need a man to define where you should go. You don't belong to Jason, and you don't belong to me. You belong to yourself. When I heard this sentence, tears began to fall again. But this time it wasn't because I was sad, it was because I finally heard someone say this to me. Leave him, Daniel said. He paused. Not for me. For yourself. I looked at him, and the moonlight fell on his face, illuminating his outline clearly. He's not waiting for an answer, he's waiting for a decision. That night, I got home and Jason wasn't back yet. I walked into the bedroom, opened the closet and took out a suitcase. I put all my clothes, painting supplies, and the sage pole in it. Then I sat on the edge of the bed, took out my phone, and sent Jason a message. I want a divorce. 3 seconds later, the phone rang. Are you crazy? Jason's voice was as sharp as a cat's tail being stepped on. What are you talking about? I'm saying, I want a divorce. Because of Daniel? Did you get involved with him? No. Then why did you dash? Because I'm tired, I said. I'm tired of waiting for you to come back, tired of eating alone when you're not here, tired of hearing you say, stop being dramatic, tired of seeing you showing off your affection with other women on Instagram, tired of being the background in your life. There was silence on the other end of the phone for a long time. Do you know what you will lose if you get divorced? Jason's voice changed and turned into a coldness I had never heard before. You have nothing. You have no job, no income. This house is my premarital property, and I bought your car. You don't even have the money to hire a lawyer. I know. You'll have nothing. Maybe, I said, but at least I won't be your wife anymore. I hung up the phone. The next morning I moved out of the house. I put my luggage in the trunk of my car and drove to a friend's house. My friend's name was Sarah, who was my roommate in college. She saw me standing at the door and didn't ask anything. She just said, come in, I'll make you coffee. I stayed in her guest room for 3 days. On the 3rd day, Daniel sent me a message. Are you okay? It's okay. He spread the word in the company. He said that you were mentally unstable and receiving treatment. He wanted to use this reason to get the divorce lawsuit dismissed. I looked at the screen, my fingers resting on the keyboard for a moment. How dare he? He dares. Because he thinks you don't have the ability to fight back. I put down my phone and walked to the window. Outside the window is Sarah's backyard, a large oak tree, its leaves turning in the wind, making a rustling sound. I gave Daniel a call. Can you help me? I asked. What do you need? A lawyer. A good one. Okay. One more thing. What? Chloe. Does she have anything in the company? I don't know how to put it. Interest relationship? Daniel took the words and said, yes. She held the title of consultant in Jason's department and received a monthly consulting fee of $8,000, but she had never done any consulting work. The money came from Jason's project budget. My fingers tightened around the phone. Is this appropriation? Calculate. Can you prove it? Able. I took a deep breath. Then do it. Are you sure? Sure. He was silent for a while. Emily, you have to think clearly. Once you start, there's no turning back. He will be investigated, fired, and will have a hard time finding another job in this industry. I know. Are you still sure? I looked at the oak trees outside the window. The leaves were turning in the wind, like countless hands waving. Okay. A week later, Apex Systems launched an internal review. I don't know exactly what Daniel did, but I know the result: Jason was suspended for investigation due to inappropriate relationship and illegal use of project budget. Chloe's consulting contract was terminated, and several of her contacts in the industry simultaneously withdrew their recommendations. When the news reached Jason's ears, he was outside Sarah's house. I looked through the window and saw him standing next to the car. His tie was crooked, his hair was messy, and his eyes were as red as a rabbit. He rang the doorbell. I opened the door. Did you do this to me? His voice was trembling, not sure if it was anger or fear. I stood in the doorway, looking at the man I had been married to for 7 years. He looked embarrassed, angry, and helpless, like a man who suddenly found himself standing on the edge of a cliff. No, I said. My voice was very calm, so calm that even I felt strange. You did. He froze. Every choice you made, I said, every time you didn't come back, every time you lied, every time you were with another woman, every time you said stop being dramatic to me, it was your own choice. I didn't force you to do anything. But Daniel just showed you the consequences. Just like you showed me what kind of person you are. He stood there with his mouth open and the light in his eyes slowly extinguished. He suddenly became very small, as if compressed by something. Emily, he said, his voice suddenly softening into the pleading tone I'd heard countless times. We can talk about. No, I said. We have nothing more to talk about. I closed the door. Outside the door, his car's engine rang for a long time and then drove away. I leaned against the door and closed my eyes. My heart was beating steadily, no pain, no soreness, nothing. It's like a pipe that has been blocked for a long time and is finally open. 2 weeks later, the divorce papers were signed. I got more than I expected, not because Jason suddenly became generous, but because the lawyer Daniel hired dug through his financial records for the past 3 years and found evidence that he had concealed his income. Jason was forced to leave his job. Chloe completely disappeared from that circle. It wasn't that someone blocked her, but that everyone suddenly knew who she was and kept their distance from her. I moved into a small apartment. There are 2 bedrooms and 1 living room, with the windows facing east, and the sunlight can shine on the painting table every morning. I started drawing. It's not the kind of commercial illustrations I draw for clients. I draw what I want to draw myself: the riverside, the willow trees, the stones in the water, the brown trout. One day, I received a sum of money. Not much, but enough to pay my rent for half a year. The transfer note reads, art supplies fee. I didn't push back or say thank you. I saved the money and then drew a picture of morning fog on the river, stones in the water, and the back of a man in the distance, wearing a hat and carrying a suitcase. After I finished painting, I leaned it against the wall and looked at it for a long time. Then I put the painting away in the cabinet. A few more weeks passed. One morning, when I woke up, it was raining outside the window. The rain was not heavy, but it was raining thinly and densely. It hit the windows and made a nice sound. I was lying on the bed, looking at the ceiling, and something suddenly occurred to me. I hadn't thought about Jason in a long time. It's not that I didn't think about it intentionally, I really forgot. His face became blurry in my memory, like a photo soaked in water. I remember his voice, his mannerisms, the way he frowned, but I can't remember the way he smiled. I turned over, buried my face in the pillow, and smiled. Not a bitter smile, not a smile of relief, just the smile. I put on my clothes and drove to the river. There is no one by the river on a rainy day. The water was a little higher than usual and flowed a little faster, but it was still just as clear. I put on my wading shoes, took the sage pole, and walked into the water. The water was cold, but my feet were used to it. I stood next to the big rock, Daniel's rock, and threw the line out. Once, twice, 3 times. The line drew an arc in the rain curtain and landed on the point I had spotted. The raindrops hit the water surface, stirring up countless small circles. Those circles collided with each other and broke into smaller circles. I tossed for about 20 minutes when I felt a slight tug on the other end of the line. I paused for a moment to feel the direction. Then I reeled in the line. The shaft of the rod was bent into an arc, and the line drew a line in the water. I could feel the fish struggling under the water, darting left and right, trying to escape the hook. I'm not in a hurry. I let the fish swim for a while, feeling its rhythm, then slowly reeled in the line and guided it to my feet. That was a good trout. About 40 centimeters, with a silver body and black spots on the back. The gill cover is golden, as if it were plated with a layer of copper. It jumped in my net, and its tail slapped on the water, making a splash. I squatted down, gently took out the hook, held it in both hands, and let it soak in the water. It paused in my hand. I could feel its heartbeat, very fast and hard, as if it was saying let me go. I let go. It flicked its tail and disappeared into the deep water. I squatted in the water, and the rain fell on my hair, back, and shoulders. I looked in the direction where the fish disappeared, and suddenly felt something loosen in my chest. Not sad, not happy, but a deep and quiet okay. I stood up, reeled in the line, and walked back to shore with the pole. Daniel stood on the river bank, leaning against his suitcase. His hat was lowered, and rainwater dripped from the brim. When he came, I don't know. I looked at him and he didn't speak. He just stood there, like a tree, like a stone, like an existence that needed no explanation. I walked up to him and leaned the pole against the suitcase. There was about a meter between us, and the rain fell between us like a transparent curtain. Did you catch it? He asked. Yeah. Is it big? It's okay. He nodded and didn't ask again. I stood there, looking at his face. The rain hit his face and ran down his cheekbones, but he didn't wipe it away. His eyes are gray-blue, like the river, like the sky, like this rainy day. I caught it, I said. I saw it. I didn't mean fish. He looked at me, and something moved in his eyes. I lowered my head and looked at the stones at my feet. The rain wet the stone, and the color became very dark, as if it had been soaked in ink. Thank you, I said. Thank you for not lying to me and not looking twice at me when you said nice to meet you in the banquet hall. Thank you for disappearing for 2 weeks and letting me cry. Thank you for not saying those words when I was most vulnerable. He didn't speak. I raised my head and looked at him. I know what I want now. What? I want to paint. I want to fish. I want to wake up every morning and know who I am without anyone telling me. The corner of his mouth moved, and the very shallow arc was like a ripple on the river. That's good, he said. I picked up the pole, put away the line, took off my waders, and put them in the trunk of the car. I opened the door, got in, and started the engine. Daniel stood on the river bank, looking at me without coming over. I put the car in reverse and the car slowly backed up on the gravel. I looked at him through the car window. His figure became smaller and smaller in the rearview mirror, turning into a small, like a ripple on the river. I hit the brakes and rolled down the window. Daniel, I shouted. He looked at me. Tomorrow morning, 6 o'clock? He stood in the rain, and the water dripped from the brim of his hat, dripping on the clothes on his chest, spreading a small patch of dark color. Then he laughed. Not a polite, social laugh. A real smile that begins in the eyes, like a river thawing. 6 o'clock, he said. I rolled up the window and pulled off the gravel onto the highway. The wipers swung on the windshield, sweeping the rain to both sides, and the road ahead was clear. I drove very slowly because I suddenly thought of something, that fish. I let it go. Not because of the rules, not because of catch and release, but because I wanted to go back to the water, back to where it belongs. And I am back where I belong. Not in that house. Not next to that person. Not in anyone's expectations. By my own river. I held the steering wheel tightly, stepped on the accelerator, and the car drove forward in the rain. The riverbank was no longer visible in the rearview mirror, but I knew it was there. Daniel is there. The trout was there too, in the deep water, under the rocks, swimming in a world of its own. And me. I finally don't have to wait for anyone to come back. Because I'm already here.